Healing is actually optimal, not just when the body is at rest, but when the body is at relaxation. That's when the body can actually optimally reset itself because it's not fighting anything off.
Hello, thank you for tuning into the Natural Health Rising podcast. My name is Rachel Smith. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I've helped hundreds of people naturally reverse symptoms of autoimmune diseases and other health challenges, from digestive issues to hormone imbalances. And in these weekly episodes, you're going to learn from myself and top health experts from around the world about functional medicine and holistic health tips to help you rise to your healthiest, happiest self. On this episode of the Natural Health Rising podcast, I have Tah and Kole Whitty with me. Tah and Kole are co-hosts of the Psychedelic Coach podcast and co-founders of the Condor Approach, a program that blends ancient wisdom with modern coaching to ensure lasting breakthroughs and resilience. With over 20 years of experience in health and wellness, Tah's 25 years as a nurse in busy New York City emergency rooms, and their combined 25 years in the psychedelic space, they empower individuals to master their nervous systems, translate their body's language, and integrate psychedelic experiences into everyday life. Their compassionate and engaging style has made them sought-after speakers, leaders, and pioneers in the field of psychedelic integration and personal transformation. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hopefully our Chihuahua, I just noticed, gave us a little yipe. He wanted to also be included. So I guess we'll say Tah and Kole and 2 5-pound teeny tiny dogs.
Perfect. We're going to roll with it.
Yes.
Can you both share, I know you have intricate stories and everything, but can you share a little bit about each of your journeys and what led you to doing this work together today?
Ooh, I mean, that would be the hour per person, right? So I'm going to give
Yeah.
the 2-minute cliff notes just for context for today, because there's a lot of nuance to each of our stories and what led us here, which I'm sure same with you. It's like, if you get into health and wellness, it's usually, or at least typically, at least if you're at the forefront of health and wellness, it's usually because someone had to. You had to kind of take your health into your own hands. And so for me, the short version, just for context today, I was an at-risk youth, a lot of experiences in my childhood that I couldn't outrun by the time I was in my 20s. So at 26 years old, I had autoimmune issues, fibromyalgia, migraines. I'd had 3 traumatic brain injuries, 1 from a coma. I mean, so many broken bones and accidents and incidents that I had been cast into the once an addict, always an addict world, we'll say, in my late teens from substance abuse that actually led to a coma from a contaminated batch of a substance. And so when I first got introduced to psychedelics therapeutically, it went against all of my indoctrination of the once an addict, always an addict, we'll say, protocol, and the disempowering component of that, because by 19 years old, I was a professional speaker for substance abuse education for the DARE program. I did national talk shows, Montel Williams. I did Miss Teen USA as Miss Utah, like all these advocacy positions, we'll say, to educate on the dangers of club drugs. So fast forward at 26, when I have all these health problems, I changed my diet and lifestyle, which helped about 60% of my symptoms. But then through prayer, through intention, through kind of the signs in my life, I got introduced to psychedelics as a healing modality. And it took a lot to face and confront all of those parts. But I had a deep understanding that emotions and my past were playing in my current health. And that no matter how much I biohacked, or, I mean, they didn't have biohacking back then, but there weren't any tools I could change my entire physicality completely. I would say in changing diet and lifestyle and really learning about the part of inflammation and certain foods helped 60% of those symptoms, but the other 40% was self-hate and loathing and not feeling worthy and how I was internalizing the emotions I refused to feel. And so that was really where it kicked off for me at 26 in exploring therapeutically with guided psychedelic experiences. The person I started with had 40 plus years at that point, or we'll say 35 years at that point. So, you know, it was just the right person at just the right time and all the right signs that got me to lean into something I would say was the complete opposite of that point. So that's my cliff notes to there.
I'm going to take a deep breath for those cliff notes.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a journey. And you're saying you sounds like you had a lot of these like adverse childhood experiences,
Yes.
ACEs, right? And we do know that the more ACEs that you have, actually the more likely you are to develop autoimmunity. And when we
Yes.
have these major stressful events in our lives, as well as we move along life, even into adulthood, about 80% of people with autoimmune diseases report that their autoimmune disease all of a sudden started or it kind of flared up and really started once they had some sort of big stressful event, right? So
Well,
all of
and
that plays such a big role.
yes, and we'll, after we get through this part, we could talk about what we saw with all our functional medicine practitioner, doctors, biohackers that came as clients of ours who
Ooh,
didn't have ACEs beyond a one,
okay.
right? And how autoimmune showed up there. So I'm excited. We're going to unpack a lot.
There are loads and loads of
So
things
much.
to unpack. Well, thank you for having us here. I'm Tah, and I have a very long, involved, very intricate history that people look at me and they say, "How could you know all the things that you know?" And I tell them, "Well, I'm on my 53rd rotation around the planet." And they're like, "What?" And they look at me and they're like, "How did you get this way? I didn't always look this way. I've been rolling things back by letting things go." And so I grew up
Mm.
in Brooklyn in the 70s. I was born in 1971, and I was born right into the time of all of the gang wars that were happening in the 70s in New York City. And we had the huge blackout in the 70s, and we had all kinds of weird stuff. Serial killers were going on, the Son of Sam. There was a lot of traumatic stuff happening in the 70s. Then the 80s rolled around, and we had crack. And the crack epidemic disrupted the entire New York City. And I was a kid that grew up and I wet the bed until I was 14 years old. And so I had a lot of trauma in my household around my self-esteem, around hygiene, around a lot of things that were going on in my life. There was a lot of violence in my family. And that is something that I thought was normal. I thought that violence was just a normal situation that everybody went through. And I didn't realize until I was an adult that this isn't how everybody's living. And there's a lot of violence, and not just violence physically, but a lot of mental violence, a lot of emotional violence. And through all of the traumas and the dramas that I had, the one I was born about 23 months, not about exactly 23 months after my brother. And so I asked my mother one time, how come I'm so close in age to my brother? And she said, "Well, you're the surprise baby. We didn't plan for you." And I took that as I was a mistake. And so I spent the greater part of my life making sure that my mother never thought I was in any kind of space that would be outside of her love. And I was terrified that she wouldn't love me. She would love me less than I was already because I was a mistake. And so I learned to lie, and I lied about everything. And I was a walking lie machine. I told lies about things that didn't need to have lies about. And I had lies for each person, and then I had lies for groups of people. And so I was this machine that was built on dishonesty and inauthenticity. And I didn't find out till later in life how taxing that was on my body. And I went to school, went to high school. Um, there was a lot of drama around high school and me flunking out of a lot of classes in high school because I was bored. I went to college, did honors. I got honors in college because I was actually a really intelligent kid. And I went to a community college and I did my nursing. I got my nursing degree at the age of 20. And I became a registered nurse at 20. I wasn't even old enough to drink. I actually became a father at the age of 18. And so I was a father at a very young age, and when I graduated from nursing school, my daughter came to live with me when she was 3 years old, and I played the single parent role for a while. And I saw how deeply embedded the lies were, and how I was teaching my daughter to lie just by being dishonest in myself. And so it was something that I had a lot of challenges around. And so I saw how all of the trauma stuff leaked into my life. And I worked in New York City and at Kings County at one of the biggest municipal hospitals. And I worked through the AIDS and HIV epidemic. It was absolutely crazy. The things that I learned, the traumas that I saw, were insane. And throughout my career, I've worked in over 12 hospitals in New York City. I mean, I think it's about 14 hospitals I worked at in New York City because I wanted to see what it was like in different areas, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different race and ethnicities. And I learned a lot about people. And the one thing that I learned that was the most common space was loneliness. And that most of the diseases were driven by people feeling they were separate from other people. And that loneliness drove people to be dishonest and lie and hide and be in shame spaces. And I saw how that was reflective of me. And I wanted to get out of the hospital system. And so I saw, at a particular time, I saw the flu vaccines being really pushed hard, and Lipitor and some other drugs being pushed really hard by the pharmaceutical companies that I didn't agree with. And I kept seeing the money machine growing and repeat customers coming in over and over and over. And it made me feel really hurt, really dissonant, because the hospital was the one place I felt like I could go and be honest. And I felt like the system wasn't being honest. And so I kept saying, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And I was in a relationship for about 8 years, and a relationship crashed, and everything in my life started to fall apart. And then I injured my back, and I herniated L5S1, and I fractured one of my vertebrae, and I couldn't walk for 3 months. And so at that time, I was looking to transition. I had transitioned into personal training and coaching, but I had lost all my coaching clients, all of my personal training clients. I couldn't work at the hospital. I was in dire straits, and the relationship that I was in collapsed. And Cole and I were we were homies,
First.
like we were homies, and then we then we moved into horizontal mambo homies, and right, and we were doing fitness challenges, and people were losing hundreds of pounds. We both had clients that lost over 200 pounds, and but they would put the weight back on, and we were like, "What's going on with this?"
This is deeper than just diet and exercise. Why are people putting it back on so easily? Even if they kept their diet the same, over time we saw them start to put it back on.
So when I injured my back, Cole had said to me, she had said to me, hey, listen, I see where you are, and I really think that you're a brilliant person, and I feel like I know something that'll tie everything together for you. And I was like, well, what's that? And she's like, well, go for a ceremony. And I was like, well, what's a ceremony? And she said, well, you get in a room with these people, and you sit in a circle, and you take these plants, and you go into the psychedelic realm, and you find yourself. And I was like, oh, you want me to do drugs with some hippie white people, right? And I was like, I'm not doing that. And she was like, all right. And then when I hurt my back, and then she had told me another time, hey, and a ceremony's coming up, and I really think this would be awesome for you. And I was like, you know what? I'll do it for you. I'll go for you, right?
Which we don't normally recommend someone do it for
Don't do
someone
that.
else, but I was like, hey, if this is the only
That was
way, I'll
I,
I'll ride it.
I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me, but I had to put it in the guise of I was doing it for
Yeah.
her. I was terrified. And I was indoctrinated into the healthcare industry that any kind of substance that alters you, other than the opiates and the things that they give you at the hospital, is street drugs, and you're going to become a crackhead.
Yeah.
And so I was absolutely terrified that I was going to become a crackhead. And remember, I grew up in the 80s, right? In the crack epidemic in New York. I was terrified. And I took care of people that were on substances all the time, and people that were inundated with alcohol. I didn't have my first alcoholic beverage until I was 25 because of what I saw at the hospitals. And I didn't make an attempt to smoke weed until I was 36. And I still don't, it's still not my thing, right? And so I went into this experience, and I was absolutely terrified for the first 2 or 3 hours. I was terrified until Cole said, Tah, why don't you just let go? And I let go. And I let go of all of the control that I had been having in my life.
Or thought you had.
I had let go of all the control I had been having in my life, and the lies that I had been doing to control other people's perception of me. That all the things I was looking to manipulate, all of the control devices that I thought I had jurisdiction over, I let go of. And my body got to relax for the first time I could ever remember, period. And I didn't know what relaxation was like. And I fell into this place where it was like, I was completely unfamiliar with it. And I wanted to learn how to anchor myself to that. And the people that Cole brought me around for this experience were amazing at integration. And I had no idea what integration was. A couple of weeks later, I was having a really challenging time, and I needed help, and they helped me to integrate and to pull all the things together that happened at this experience with my day-to-day life. And this tied together how I create habits around the things that I've picked up in psychedelic experiences and how it changed my life. And hands down, as a registered nurse with 32 years of experience, 25 in ER, I have never seen anything as transformational as psychedelics in all of my experience. And I've had a lot of experience. Never seen anything as transformational. I am walking, talking, living, breathing proof of it.
Hmm.
And I will sing it from the mountaintops. So that's my story. It's not 2 minutes though.
That's okay. It was great. It was amazing. And I want to dive into more of what those benefits are for people. And it sounds like they transformed your lives, but I want to know a little bit more about how do these things help people with autoimmune diseases or chronic health issues? And then we can also dive deeper into, like you guys talked about already, loneliness and shame and these other emotional components of this as well.
You know what I can share, because in working as facilitators, which we don't currently do, just because now we're focused in education and really public information and just trainings instead. But what I can tell you is from all of the clients and people we worked with, majority were functional medicine doctors, chiropractors, biohackers. So people that know their biometrics, people that track all the things, people that have access to all of the things. And the
Hmm.
majority of them had ACEs scores under 2, like even 0. So if you follow only the ACEs test, we would assume these were people that were healthy, but these were the people that had all the proof that they couldn't just biohack or chemistry themselves into health. It could buy them more time and more vitality, but that there was other things at play. And so when someone, the most common from the people we worked with. So again, anything we say is based off our experience. We are experts of our perspective only, and even that changes. So besides that, nothing that we say ought to be taken as law, but it is a place to start off. If you're, we're in, your podcast is one on health and wellness, so it's a great starting point. That with autoimmune, 8 out of 10 of the people we worked with had a father that gave significance and love for high achievement, withdrew if they didn't have the high achievement, or was totally emotionally absent. And it didn't matter if they were physically gone, only emotionally gone. 8 out of 10 with autoimmune, adrenal issues, Lyme's disease that is active and making it impossible to work, had that common theme. Because Tah's a nurse, he triaged like a nurse. He tracked dosages like a nurse. We worked primarily with psilocybin and wachuma, also known as San Pedro. We led trips to Peru. We've done hundreds of retreats, from one-on-one to internationally. We've worked with a lot of different people, but the majority demographic was health and wellness folks, actually. And so when we saw autoimmune, as we go deeper into it, the potential of something like psilocybin containing mushrooms, the mushrooms aren't doing the healing. They're helping you to see what things are going on in your own past, in your own body, the way that you relate to stress, the way you internalize. It's a common thing that people will say, oh, mushrooms made me sick. It made me nauseous. For us, that is not a happenstance or a reaction. It's a consequence with sequence. If you have a lot of emotions or things you're over digesting, then you're getting sick to your stomach. You're upset. Is there unprocessed anger, hurt, thoughts spinning that someone's actually over digesting or storing emotions in the belly? That in the beginning of a ceremony, we could do some abdominal massage before they're altered to help move energy, or have someone make sound, or we could do breath work. And we found there was other ways to work with the sensations, that it wasn't just, oh, I get nauseous when I have mushrooms. It's, oh, mushrooms turn up the volume of what I'm experiencing. So this is where starting to learn the body's intelligence, there's nothing like it than psychedelic experiences, or MDMA, which is what we would call a heart opener, because it's a serotonin releaser. People tend to feel really good, where mushrooms we would call a spirit molecule or a spirit teacher, because of the, some would say religious, some would say spiritual, some would say the more imaginative opening of the imagination. So it's a more feminine, open, creative space. And so as we started to work with people with similar diagnosis, because we were getting predominantly people with autoimmune issues, actually, we started to see similar themes in their childhoods, in their thoughts, in their high performance. And that was one of the other things we saw so frequently, was autoimmune people that were athletes in college and high school, great in school, then college destroyed a lot of people, to be honest. So we can talk about the different aspects of it, but it's more about what these substances will show us. We don't call it plant medicine. Some people do. For us, mushrooms, for example, are not plants. They are fungi, not the same. And also, we see these more as teachers that can help you see yourself if you're willing to see. And that is the scariest part for most people.
These people, so you've worked with a lot of people who were already into health and wellness first. So then they're uncovering like these deeper emotional layers and past and how they were raised and all of these things. What about for somebody who they're not into health and wellness yet? Like they're still sick. They're still eating like not a really good diet. Maybe they haven't dove into exercise too much because maybe they feel unwell and just other general lifestyle stuff. Would you say that someone should still first do those things first before even considering getting into something like psychedelics, or can they be merged together? Like, could they do the psychedelics first? What would be an order of operations?
Yeah, so they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes when you have a person and there's a CPR situation, the best thing, the first thing that's available is really important. And so sometimes if people have diet and exercise that's available, cool. If people don't have that and they don't have the guidance in that space, psychedelics can also help at the same time. You do not have to be on a dieta or anything like that for psychedelics to be effective for you. Now, when you're talking about it being optimal, there's an optimal space of you being in a space where you can fast and have clean water without any kind of additives and preservatives in your food, no highly processed stuff. It's really important for an optimal experience, and it's not absolutely necessary. Now, the function of psychedelics is very unique in contrast to a lot of other things for state changing circumstances with a person. Alcohol changes your state, right? It doesn't change your state in the same way that psychedelics do. Now, if you could imagine your brain has billions of nerve cells that make up your brain, and they all network together. And if you could imagine a person is having self-deprecating thoughts, and those self-deprecating thoughts roll through a particular network over and over again, and that gets etched into the brain, and so the person falls back into that brain pattern over and over again. What happens when you have psychedelics is, for a period of time, those networks become disengaged, and you can re-engage in a different way and actually see things differently, perceive things differently, and feel differently because you are now outside of that default mode. So the default mode network gets disabled, and all of the networks, or not all of, but a bunch of the networks in the brain get lit up so that you can actually reprogram the brain. Now, this is where when you have a really great facilitator, an amazing curandera, or huachumero, ayahuasquero, all of these different people who facilitate psychedelic experiences, if you can be brought back into your attention and learn how to anchor that, and then after your psychedelic experience, integrate that together and have that become a new habit, you can make a new habit in a shorter period of time than going for 20 years of therapy, right? And so this is where the magic of psychedelics in conjunction with therapy is absolutely, you can't beat it. So when you have this solid situation of the brain being able to dislodge from these old patterns, you can reprogram yourself around the feeling. Now, when we have autoimmune issues, your immunity is not there by mistake. It's there to protect you. And so if the body is attacking something, it's looking for something to attack, or there's a reason for something to attack. And if a person is in a space where they're steeped in shame, and shame becomes part of the default mode network, there is an activation of inflammation and all sorts of things that happen in the body when you're in that space. Even if you're not aware of it, if it's playing in the background in the unconscious circuits of the mind and the brain, okay, because they're not the same thing. We can talk about that for hours if you wanted to. When you talk about dismantling this stuff, writing a new program around the awesome feeling that you're having, around the confidence that you want, around the love that you want to feel in the connection, the brain will rewire itself around that, and the activities within the body, in the immune system, in your systems of hormonal secretion and all of these things changes, and that changes the environment within the body. It changes the pH of the blood. It enables you to be in a position where you can actually activate all of the things that will cause healing. Now, Healing, now I'm going to take a breath real quick. Healing is actually optimal, not just when the body is at rest, but when the body is at relaxation. That's when the body can actually optimally reset itself because it's not fighting anything off. If you're in a position where you're activating shame and you're activating your immune system in the background, the body is preparing for something. And so it's not in an optimal space to actually heal itself. So being in a position where if you're on all the time, right? You've heard people say that I'm on all the time, right?
Hmm.
I'm approximating you've heard that, right? I'm on all the time. To be able to turn off for a little while and let the body actually fully gel, fully relax, the body will take care of itself and reset all the things it needs to reset, including the immune system, including your hormonal complexes, including your heart lung matrix. All of these things will remedy themselves if you can actually relax. And coming from a person who did not know how to relax, if you saw pictures of me in my 30s, you wouldn't recognize me. The body that I have now is absolutely bananas. It's crazy. The things
It's
that
so
I'm telling you, the
good.
things that I can do with my body right now, I just 2 weeks ago, I did my first muscle up with no assistance in the park. Like I'm in my 50s, right? And people are like, "You're in your 50s." I'm like, I'm telling you, you gotta see what my body's able to do when I'm able to let go and actually fall into relaxation. And so that is where the healing environment is. Whenever somebody comes to us and says, "I'm having challenges with this stuff," there's a space where they're not relaxing and the body's not able to heal. And so, how deeply can you get into relaxation? That's what I'm leaning into with this.
Yeah, yeah. Um, when you were saying that the default mode network becomes disengaged, so
Hmm.
this is happening during, let's use mushrooms as the example. So this is going to happen while the person is on their journey, their experience, and then afterwards, is there like a malleable space for a certain amount of time with that?
Yes, it's called neuroplasticity, and so
Okay.
the brain is malleable in what we would call neuroplastic states. Psychedelics provide those environments. Okay, breath work and altered states like that provide that environment. Trauma. Okay, and this is something that people don't uh, associate with plasticity. Trauma is a great place for plasticity. When you hit somebody, they have to build resilience. So the brain becomes plastic around that circumstance. And this is why people wire in trauma so quickly. And
Mm.
it stays with them so quickly because it is a neuroplastic state.
And it's the whole sequence around the event and the body's reaction to the whole sequence of events, not just the moment.
Right. And so when you have people with high ACEs score, like you were talking about, the people have adverse childhood experiences. They usually happen over and over and over again. So the kid is neuroplastic from being hit, and then they're being yelled at, they're being threatened, and so they're in a very neuroplastic state. So the brain will wire itself around that. And so it will wire itself to be attacking something all the time because it's in survival mode. And you can build a body around survival. You can build a body around thrival. You can build a body around relaxation. You can build a body around all kinds of stuff. But this is where trauma gets baked in because it's a neuroplastic state. So the thing is, there's two ways to make habits. There's impact, and then there's repetition. Okay, from doing something over and over again. And then there's impact and repetition. So if I'm telling you I love you, right? I tell you I love you. Oh, that's wonderful. We have our first kiss. It's beautiful. There's some impact there. But if we're kissing over and over again and we're telling each other that we love each other, that starts to get ironed in. And we start to have this feeling that becomes part of what and who we are, and we move into that space. It's the same thing with trauma. It's the same thing with healing. It's the same thing with all of this stuff. But when you're in psychedelics, you have this ripe opportunity where the default mode network is disengaged, and you have this new wiring that you've put into place, and before it slides back into the old place, you have an opportunity to iron in the new stuff, and that's where intentional integration comes into play, and that is magical.
Yeah, and that integration piece. So someone could, let's say they go down to Peru to work with ayahuasca and the Shipibo tribe or one of the tribes down there. If they come home to an environment that they don't feel safe in, a partner they don't feel safe with, they are still in a heightened neuroplastic state because of what they just experienced. I like
Mhm.
to kind of like wet cement. We've poured the cement, there's a new shape, but it still needs time to really solidify and become a new state. Right now, it's more of a, you know, it's still working on it. It's still kind of like recalibrating a little bit. So if someone returns after a peak experience into an environment that doesn't feel safe, the impact of that not feeling safe or that experience of no safety
Mhm.
not necessarily trauma, but it can be a traumatic brain thing. Let's say they go home and get in a fight with their spouse. It can deepen the impact of that fight because they are still neuroplastic. In particular, those first 7 to 14 days, depending on the really more of the impact of the experience on the person, they are still more open than other times of their life and their experience. And it's something that it isn't always functional in a Western mindset to say, oh, well, I'm going to go down and do ayahuasca 10 times over 2 weeks, because if one time is like 20 years of therapy, then 10 times must be like 200 years of therapy, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the case. More is not more. The body is process oriented. And so people come with this committed high performance or desperation. Their health is failing. They don't know what else to do. So they take their only $5,000 and go to Costa Rica and say, I'm going to do this retreat and it's going to fix everything. It's more like it might illuminate a lot of things. But if there's so much pressure going in, quite often the lesson ends up being that you can't rush healing as much as you want to. So there's all this nuance to it. And we no longer live at a time that going into this blindly is a great idea. We're seeing harm rising because people are seeing the documentaries. They're, seeing Aaron Rodgers on television, and he's a big football player, or they're seeing other stories that we're also seeing that same consumeristic approach in our Western life coming into the psychedelic space, and more harm than we ever saw 5+ years ago. I've been doing this for 16 years, and I've seen more harm in the last 2, or, soldiers suffering with PTSD where it hasn't become legalized where they live. So they go to another veteran that it helped them, but they don't have the skill of the intake process. They don't understand there's other constructs that create a person besides war. Things of even why did someone join the military? There can be woundings and traumas. So in an experience, we're getting soldiers and people that aren't okay after a psychedelic experience, and then no one around them knows what to do. And I don't think that it's any longer a privilege or a just convenience thing to not be informed. Like, we have to get more people informed because the FDA just tossed out more studies of MDMA therapy. There's things happening in the government levels that is prolonging or putting off approvals for certain therapies. That does not mean people are not exploring them. It means it's staying underground and that there's less legal support, and why we're such big advocates for psychedelic informed coaching, where you're not administering, right? Because legally, you can't legally, but that it's becoming necessary part of society now because there's too much research out there for people to ignore it if it could help.
Yeah. I want to hear a little bit more about how to utilize this neuroplasticity space the best. Like, while someone's actually in the journey, let's say they're with some facilitator, like, is there something that facilitator should be doing to make sure that something's getting rewired in the experience, to make it the safest experience ever and the most beneficial? And then also after, in that 7 to 14 days, what is like the optimal thing that should happen? Should this person be going to a trained, like, licensed EMDR therapist or internal family systems? Like, is there something in that space, or a psychedelic coach, for example?
I'll give about 2 minutes of what my answer to that is, and I know Tah's will vary a little bit, or because we're still 2 different people in spite of being a third entity together. We do have our own opinions. For me, as far as what a facilitator can do, we break these down into different layers. There's a trip sitter who is not involved in the experience at all. They're literally there just to sit. And then we have space holders, then we have facilitators. So without having the time to dive into each, some ways that someone could cue themselves is, if there is a song playing and you're in an experience and you want to remember it, have the facilitator or trip sitter write down, what song is this? Say, hey, can you write down this song? Because now tomorrow I can go home and listen to that song and try to recreate chemically the feeling I felt in my body during that experience, what I saw, what I smelled, what I felt, Where did I feel it? And create a daily ritual. Maybe the first 5 minutes, just listen to that song every morning to bring it back. For me, having a chronic pain body for a long time, psychedelics for 2 years, I didn't have visuals. I had the feeling of not being in pain, and I would sit and listen to the song and memorize the sensation in my body. And sometimes I could go, oh, there's no pain in my left knee. So, what does my left knee feel like? Can I spread that sensation? And by having the smell of the Palo Santo, which is what they were burning, so scent is a strong anchor, and the song, then the next day or the days to follow, I would return to the song, burn a little bit of Palo Santo, and bring that sensation back so that I could create and support that habit in my mind and in my body. So that's one way that it can look. It really is a bio-individual thing. So going into it, if you know that you're a tactile person, I also wear big rings that have big stones from my friend Patango, who's an incredible jeweler, but they're big enough for me to feel. So when I'm feeling something that feels good, I'll have a ring on my middle finger, I'll push on that ring. Because what it's doing is it's helping me find a physical anchor to return to that helps if, oh wow, I'm feeling really confident. Okay, this is what confidence feels like. Then before I go on stage or do something new, you'll see sometimes I'll be pushing on my middle finger. It's like I'm pushing the button from an old ceremony of this is what confidence feels like in my body. And so I can bring it back into my mind and into the sensation. So there's lots of ways to do it. If someone did experience a trauma or something new came in, EMDR might be great, or internal family systems might be great. It's that there isn't a rule. What do you resonate with? I had incredible effects with equine therapy, right? Where you're not talking, you're working with an animal. And there was something about how after a psychedelic experience of opening my heart, the horse could help me learn authenticity because there's a certain presence you have to work with the horses. And so it helped me do it outside of my mind that was very logical because what I wanted to work with was my intuition and my body's intelligence. So equine therapy at that time was more effective for what I wanted to increase. So if you just think about like, if you felt very loose and you usually are very contracted and back pain and you didn't have that, then how could you, after this experience, maybe it's yoga, you go, wow, my body's very tight. I realized in the ceremony it can relax. What can I do to relax? What can I do to create spaciousness? Go out for a walk outside, sit by the lake or a tree to create relaxation, and then my body isn't in pain. So part of it is that self-responsibility of how could I imagine moving this forward and bringing it into a daily practice so that that neuroplasticity sticks and stays and that nothing becomes a codependency. So when you leave and you say you need additional support, some things need to be treated more like a cast. It's a support system for a period of time to fortify this new, you are integrating because there was a disintegration in your ceremony. Maybe you had a big realization and things need to change. So a therapist might be a support system for a period of time. Even at times SSRIs if someone is struggling, but it's approaching it like a cast, not like a solution, a short-term support. So if you approach it that way, what would feel for me a great way to bring this into my daily life? That's a few that came from the top of my head.
I love you so much. You're so awesome. So there was a few things. I'm going to take a breath. There are a few things that came up for me when you asked that question, and what should a facilitator do? And for me, there are no shoulds. There's what could a facilitator do? How could a facilitator perform? And it's relative to the individual. And so a facilitator needs to be skilled enough to know that there's no cookie cutter circumstance for any person based on their traumas, based on the dramas that they have, based on the medications they may have taken, based on who they live with. All of these things are very important. The first thing a facilitator needs to do from my vantage point, okay, and I'm not saying should, this is what they need to do to have the most optimal experience is do work on the front end before the person ever gets to the experience. So we call it stirring the pot. And having a really awesome intake process at the beginning is really important for a facilitator so that they actually know what this person's sets are. Now, you may have heard of set and setting. In this psychedelic experiences world, we have set and setting, where the set would be the mindset and the setting would be the actual physical place that the transformational situation takes place, right? And so we at the Condor Approach, we talk about sets. What's your mindset? What's your body set? What's your construct set, which would be your relationships, your race,
Your
religion,
job.
gender, all of these different things that we have as constructs. What's your emotional set? What's your social set? And what's your financial set? And this is something that gets bypassed in the psychedelic world a lot. We call it financial bypassing, where people don't ask people about their financial situation. And that's one of the things that's the undercurrent of what's messing with them on the deepest
The
level.
most.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
so the front end work, doing an intake process and doing a form that has questions, and then asking the person, where are you? What's been going on? So we kind of stir the pot. And when you stir the pot, all of the unconscious stuff comes to the surface, so that psychedelics don't have to go digging and moving things around. And so an awesome facilitator, from my vantage point, does work on the front end way before the person gets to the psychedelic experience, so that they see what's going on, they can see what some of the undercurrent of what's bothering them, and they also get to dial in with the facilitator and listen to the facilitator's voice and be in the presence of the facilitator in some way or shape or form. And when you're in a psychedelic experience, and you're out in the ethers and you're seeing whatever you're seeing, to have a voice that you can anchor to that your body knows is safe allows your body to actually relax. Remember, when your body is relaxed, you can go out into realms that you've never been to before. But when the body is tense and it's afraid of what's going on in the environment, it makes it challenging for you to have the deepest, most safe, most expansive experience. And this is what was the thing that was heralded about me and Cole, is we provided an environment for people to have safety. And so in that, a solid facilitator from my vantage point will provide a safe environment for the person before they ever have the experience. Now, after that, it's, what is your intention? What do you want to know? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? What do you want to understand from this experience? If I, as a facilitator, know what this person's intentions are, if I see them going into a space, I can, and they say something to me, I can ask them, does this have anything to do with your intention? So I can swing them back around to their intention. If a person has, things in psychedelic experiences get really inflated. And if a person tends to deflect, that deflection will come into the experience to detract them from what it is they're looking to explore. And so let me swing you back around. Do you remember what your intention was? Do you want to know? Cool. Your intention was this. How's that working for you right now? Oh, yeah, my cousin and this happened, right? And so you can bring the
Mm-hmm.
person back around. The next thing I would say a facilitator could do is ask extremely powerful questions. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're not there to do therapy. Asking questions. The person already knows, okay, on a deep level what they need. They may not be able to see it because they've had a mask on for their entire life that's built into the default mode network. So when the default mode network deactivates, it gives you a ripe opportunity to go in and ask questions to bring the person's stuff to the surface. And when that stuff comes to the surface, they can choose to iron that in or move it out. And in that space, a facilitator asks very powerful questions to lead a person into a space where they are the person guiding their experience. Facilitate, right? Facil, the lead in facilitate is to make easy. And so what I'm there as a facilitator to do is to make your process, to support your process in being easier, not to fix you. So those are some things that I would say.
Well, and something that he just said that I think is an important thing to bring to is a lot of facilitators that people would call the overnight shaman or the ones without a lot of experience, they answer a call in their heart of like, wow, I want more people to experience this, right? But getting the call does not mean today we start facilitating. And it could if there's no one else around, right? If it means this person's going to do it alone or they do it with someone. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is someone newer to this work makes it about the outcome, not the experience. And so if I say have like Rachel's going to come sit with us, which we don't do, and we don't condone the illegal or illicit use of any substances in any illegal context. So we're just saying. But what we would want to know is what you want to explore. And newer people go in looking for their breakthrough, for their transformation. And if they don't get it, then they failed. Or as a facilitator, if I don't elicit a breakthrough, like, I need a breakthrough for you, Rachel, then it becomes about me. And
Mm-hmm.
we step outside of the natural processes that a person needs to go through. And what you see with experience and over time is that there is no bottom. And as you step onto this path, one of the clear messages that took me 6 years to get, so anyone listening, I'm going to save you tens of thousands of dollars in at least 5 years, okay? The message I got in my ceremony was if you keep digging in the dirt, you'll find it. If you want to create, you have to look to the stars. I became obsessed because of all my work in health and fitness and all of that. Figure out what's wrong, fix it. Figure out what's wrong, fix it, versus what do you want and what's in the way of what you want. And when I made that small shift in my psychedelic experiences, it changed it from I need to go back to go forward to go forward, what's in the way? If it's a memory, if it's a person, if it's a thought, if it's a wounding, I welcome it to the table to be seen for the purpose of my growth, my mission, my purpose, not for my value or that I need to try to make up for anything I wasn't in the past. Because I think that coming into this, then people can get stuck in that the work means to fix. When for us, it's what do you want and then what's in the way of it versus here's all the things I don't want anymore. That's when we are still disempowered. We're still in a we would call it a victim mentality without calling victimization a bad thing, but still the something bad happened to me, so I'm going to try to rescue my wounded self. We say, what do you want? What do you want to create? What do you need to understand? And then as a coach facilitator, someone that is helping to make easy, if you have an intention you want to explore, we see more often than not, people will go to other realms or see spirits or energy or whatever and never actually have any growth in their third dimensional life because they get significance from being out in the realms and the messages that they get. And then they come back and will say, so about that conversation with your mom you wanted to talk about, they're like, oh, because in those realms too, you can still bypass, you can still distract, you can still dissociate. And so it is a skill to learn for yourself and then support others to stay in alignment of where they want to grow and to stay within their power while still trusting yourself to be guided, but to never give your power away to any facilitator, to any doctor, or any substance. They're there to be in the passenger seat, more of a navigator than a driver. And that's something that if I would have known sooner, well, then we might not be here. Sorry. Learned it in perfect timing over 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I feel like a lot of people are going out and getting some sort of certification to serve these psychedelics. And you've listed a couple things so far that people can kind of look out for. And I know you both have this amazing free guide that people can go get online that lists the red flags and the green flags and how to navigate finding the right person to help. But can you share a couple of things of those red flags and green flags of finding the right guide or facilitator for a healing journey using these medicines?
Sure. One red flag would be guarantees. If someone guarantees you something, okay,
It's going to be 20 years of therapy worth.
this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to see. This is what it's going to fix. If somebody guarantees you something, that's a red flag. So I can guarantee that you'll take some substances, right? I can guarantee that you'll be that I have this place laid out for you. That's what I can guarantee you. But if somebody guarantees you a result, that would be a red flag for me. There are no solid, guaranteeable results. We can approximate certain things. We can approximate you may have an experience, but we can't tell you when you will integrate or how you will integrate that
Or
experience
how long it will last.
or how long it will take.
Yeah.
Like all of these things are really important to remember. I would say no guarantees are a place that would be a serious red flag. What about you? Next one.
Yeah, well, so one of the important things, especially when we talk about red flag, we say red flag, yellow flag, green flag. Each person, what process are you in? If you just went through a traumatic experience in a group of people, like we worked with people that were in the Las Vegas shooting however many years ago now. And so for them to be in a room with other people was too much for their nervous system to be able to like relax. So they needed to do private one-on-one work first. Right? And they did EMDR therapy first to help them know they could go to their clickers and have some things in the experience. So a red flag is individual, A green flag is individual and dependent on the situation. So what we say is there's not any right or wrong answers across the board. There are only how you feel about the answers that you get. Because someone might have taken a weekend certification, but it's someone that you know and trust as a person, so you feel safe with them and you trust yourself with yourself. You just need kind of a backup. Then that might not be a concern that they only took a 4-hour workshop, right? Or they just Googled. There was a time humans didn't have certifications and we just kind of, effed around and found out. So it's not like it didn't exist before. It's what's going to help you feel safe. If you don't like big bugs, maybe ayahuasca in the jungle, not a great idea because you're going to be confronted with big bugs and bats and things. If you've had sexual traumas with male-bodied people, you might feel safer with a female facilitator or a group of women initially. And when you'll sit and do a self-inventory on yourself, what makes you feel the most safest on a day-to-day basis? Would you prefer someone to come to your house? Would you prefer to go somewhere else? To go on a retreat can have benefits or it can be an escapism. So if you have problems in your house and you keep going on retreats quarterly, but you never bring what you learn at the retreat back home, so it's like another level of getting to know yourself. So for me personally, red flags and in years of facilitation, if someone won't tell me what they're going to give me, if someone won't tell me how much, and I don't need to know the night before because I understand I can have control things, but I'll ask someone, will you let me know tomorrow how much it was so that I don't create a like a expectation that 2 grams of mushrooms equals this. But I also do want to know more about what happens to my body because I have medical trauma and I have situational traumas. So I do want to know. I just don't need to know now, but I will want to know. So if someone refuses to tell, they'll say, nope, I'll never tell you, not my person. And then a lot of my red flags come from if someone can't handle my questions and they feel like I'm questioning them, then you're not my person. You can tell me or have a conversation with me and field my questions and say, look, I don't want you to have expectations. That's why I'm not going to tell you that answer right now. That makes sense to me. So I learn more about red flags from how many people are going to be there. If someone says 45, I'm out. Okay. I don't want 45 people in energy. I don't feel safe there. But more of my red flag comes from how do I feel about the answers I get? Can this person welcome all of my curiosities and my fears? Because if someone hides, avoids, or puts me down or shames me for my questions, I'm not going to be able to heal in a supportive way. And now I choose my environments for healing. And there's lots of ways to learn. You can learn from, Darth Vader. You can learn from Yoda. You can learn from Tony Robbins. You can learn from Oprah. Lots of ways to learn out there. I just now am more selective in where I will place myself. Even if someone's been a shaman facilitator for 30 plus years, does not mean they are any less human, any less possible to cause problems or create harm or make mistakes. So much of it I feel is, do I feel like I have someone I can speak honestly and openly with, someone willing to dialogue with me? And then of course we do have the red flags document of a long list of questions to consider for someone that might be new or unsure or whatever. But it's really take responsibility for the things that are important to you.
Have you ever dealt with anybody who had psychedelic trauma, where they actually had a psychedelic experience and then got PTSD from it, or some trauma happened in the experience?
Sure. We've had to do a lot of cleanup work around people having psychedelic experiences with facilitators and just friends, and people that were inexperienced
That
with
meant well.
that meant well, and then they opened up something. And so you can open up something. Before I even dive into that, trauma is a very natural phenomenon. It's not unnatural. It is the body and the psyche's response and the emotional complex's response to a threat, right? To a threat of violence of some sort of hurt, some sort of harm, some sort of loss, some sort of deficit, some sort of injury, death, or pain. Like any of those things bring trauma online. And so when a person goes into a psychedelic experience, if something comes up from their past, or maybe they get frightened by something that's hanging on the wall, right? And
Mm.
it opens up a trauma loop, and a person, remember, a person's neuroplastic. Okay. So if you get into a neuroplastic space while a trauma situation is going on and you hold on to that, you can anchor that in because you're in a neuroplastic space. And so the thing is, if a person comes to me after a psychedelic experience and they're in that space, I can work with a person to get them into a space where they're actually safe and relaxed enough to let go and get into a neuroplastic space outside of psychedelics. Okay, outside of psychedelics, so that they can actually relax, see where they are, see themselves from a different space, and start to move into a new alignment. And this is where an experienced facilitator, an experienced trip sitter, a space holder, all of that makes a huge difference in a person's experience, because they can see when traumas come in online, and they can actually support a person in moving through that circumstance to the other
Mm-hmm.
side of it. Because if a person doesn't get to the other side, they get locked in a loop and they stay there. And so it's, where is the trauma? How is it coming up? And how do we navigate that into a different space if the person wants to navigate that into a different space? Very important. And so in that, we've been called into spaces where people have been completely dissociated out of their bodies. Like, it's been really bananas. And so to have a skill set where you can actually lean into relaxing, getting into the space, moving through the, not running from the trauma or burying the trauma, which is what a lot of people will do. Is like, all right, let's get you these medications, let's get you some more psychedelics. What do we need to do, right? What do we need to do to move you through the cycle of the trauma? Because trauma is it's a continuum, right? It's a continuum that gets into an activated state, and then you come back down into a relaxed state. Or you get into the activated state and you stay there, right? And so if your body gets fashioned around that, you need to learn how to slide back down the the continuum. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what the difference is.
Well, and to be totally honest and in complete reality, the amount of people that did come to us and say that they were traumatized from another psychedelic experience, when we asked them if they told the facilitator, majority said
No.
no. So
Mm-hmm.
we also have this people pleasing dynamic and fawning response with people, or they think they're uniquely broken, so they couldn't go talk to the person, or they felt like the person wasn't approachable. Now, I only have one person that would say that I harmed them in their psychedelic experience. Okay, does that mean that no one else out there would say that they had a problem with me? Not that I know of, but I think that this is something that's not spoken of about, is that we can't ever create total safety, because someone's internal experience and the lens they experience it, we cannot control. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know what all their woundings are. Now, is every experience integratable? Like, could every experience be integrated for the betterment or growth of that person? Yes, because there's lessons in it. So for me, the separation of harm is so contextual because of cultural things, because of trauma things, that someone could get triggered just because I'm a white woman if they're not, right? If I am talking to them, there can be things, generational traumas and things we can't see and can't control, but we represent externally. So it's important that, and this is why for us in the psychedelic space, most of what's being sold and trained is white bodied research put mostly by white men, studied on mostly white people and certain demographics. So a lot of what's being sold as medicalized models have created trauma in other demographics for hundreds of years at this point. So it's that for us, we believe every community must have people within it that are facilitators and coaches. Because no matter what medical training or experience I have, for me to sit, say, for a person of color in Detroit with no rapport, it can already have a dynamic existing that is impossible to be supportive of them
Mm-hmm.
because of the economic and ethics are different in different people. So this is always a fascinating conversation where in mainstream people will say a hero's dose is 4 or 5 grams of mushrooms up to 7, and we work with demographics of people where high dose for them is 20 to 50 grams of mushrooms. It's not the same, so we can't have
Whoa.
the same rules. Yes, most people know the Terence McKenna's and the Paul Stamets and some of the men that have been around for a long time, but they don't know about Baba Kalindi EE, who grew up with all of them, but a Black man from Detroit. So there's voices that have not been noticed, there are voices that have not been included. And so it's important that as we talk about safety and accessibility, that it can't all be determined by white-bodied people for everyone and say this is what safety is. It's that we actually have to take a big step back, figure out what is safety for us, because 74% of therapists in this country are white women. So even if all of them were psychedelic psychotherapists tomorrow, there are people that will never feel safe in a medical office or with a therapist to truly process what they need to process. So for us, this is why we're passionate about the grassroots and getting that support across all demographics, because every community once upon a time had a medicine man, medicine woman, curandera. And for us now, this is the invitation for each community to be empowered, to have someone within the community that learns this language so they can translate the language to the people that matter to them.
And I think this is a good place for you guys to actually share a little bit about the Condor Approach and how it works and what's done in that, the trainings that you do.
Sure. So the Condor Approach is a methodology. We say integration is not optional, but how you integrate it is, because integration is going to happen no matter what. If I was to break a bone, it's going to heal no matter what. How it heals is all the difference. So the Condor Approach is like being able to get x-rays for the things that have happened in your life, to see where the misalignments and where the breaks, and we can analyze it. And then you can see structurally what's going to get you optimal. So though we say it's psychedelic integration, it's integrating life. When a woman has a baby for the first time, she has an ego death of the old self that is not there anymore. Now she is a mother. Her identity has changed. Or someone that had a medical practice that is leaving medicine behind and they worked so hard. So the Condor Approach is a system. It's a framework from intake to integration that I wish everyone had, but it teaches emotional, like how to map emotional landscapes, how to translate the body's cues. Yes, that all translates in psychedelic spaces, and it's nobody Googles how do I integrate after divorce. They do Google how do I integrate after ayahuasca, right? And so what we're doing is it all appeals to everything, and we speak to how different substances work through the body, how someone can self-identify, like, hey, you know what, ayahuasca actually isn't so great if you're having autoimmune issues or if you're having adrenal fatigue because you're tired. It's a very physical substance. Now, it doesn't mean someone can't, but it's you may want to approach differently. You may want to dieta differently than what they are telling you. And so we break down what we call the medicine wheel or the expansion wheel so that you can help get more clarity on what could be supportive. So we have 3-day trainings that are general public. Anyone that wants to learn body mapping, emotional navigation, all the things we weren't taught in school, as Tah says. And then we have 5-day trainings that are people that are more coaches, shaman, facilitators, health coaches, people that help other people already as a career or want to. And then we have a year-long coaching certification that is really, if you want to teach all these methods and truly understand them, it's 150 hours of in-person practicum and 100 hours of virtual trainings and classes. Because for us, you can't learn this online. You can't sit and study nervous system regulation and not be in a room where you can learn it and then practice it and experience it and see it. So for us, that's what the Condor Approach really is. The Condor is a vulture. So it's the people that want to be a part of the dead and dying system's evolution. They're willing to get their hands dirty, to get in there, to help break it down, to be a part of the change while never forgetting to take that bird's eye view, high level eye view, and to trust the winds as things change, trust their body to adapt, and still come to the earth to be a part of humanity's evolution.
Beautiful. Do either of you have any final messages that are on your mind that you wanted to make sure got out to the listeners today?
I do. I have a very important message for everyone listening. And that message is, deep down inside, you know everything that you need to know as an individual human being. Through training, through programming, through conditioning, you have been taught how to meticulously and intricately talk yourself out of what you know for the convenience of systems and other people. I invite you to lean into learning yourself, trusting yourself, being with yourself, and putting yourself around other people who will support you being you and who want to be supported by you so that they can be themselves. When we are all whole as individuals, our society is whole as a society. We don't need to rob, steal, take from one another, shame one another, put each other down, imprison one another, and stop each other for the convenience of someone else. Thank you. I love
Beautiful.
you. Mhm.
Anything for you, Kole?
I mean, that feels complete, and
Yeah.
thank you for having this conversation because a lot of people don't. In this field, it's 2 steps forward and sometimes 3 steps back. And we've taken the psychedelic informed coach approach because no matter what happens, we're not crossing any legal boundaries. But we know that education is key and people can't make informed decisions without more information. So thank you for being a part of sharing that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
course.
so much.
Thank you both for being on the show. Do you want to share any website, anything you want for people to reach out to you?
You can find us anywhere at the Condor Approach. The free download for the Red Flags document, I believe, is integrate.coach. We can give you the direct link as well, but that should redirect. The Psychedelic Coach podcast, and we've got lots of free things and free downloads for people that can't afford to fly to Costa Rica and aren't choosing to wait. We at least would like you to have more information.
And if you're ready to come to the Condor Approach, go to condorapproach.com and just join us. We'd love to have you.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.